Hello and welcome to Rediscovering Childhood, a podcast that brings you lots of practical information to help you become a more conscious parent. This podcast is brought to you by Discovery Playtime, an Irish business that provides high-quality educational and sensory toys to help your children develop skills through play. Visit discoveryplaytime.ie or download the app to get inspired. In this episode, we talk to autism expert Laura Crowley, and we will go through all the different traits, strengths, challenges and characteristics of what being autistic really means. And not just the things we already know, as we would be more familiar with them because they're more visible, especially in children, but we'll focus on the ones that are hidden and we can't see, but they make people really struggle with things like anxiety, overwhelm and emotional dysregulation on a daily basis. Laura was diagnosed as an autistic woman herself at 40 years of age, when she already had many years' experience working in the autism field, while feeling broken and misunderstood. She also has an autistic child and a neurotypical child, so she values and appreciates the difference between them and between our brains. She will show us how we could create a more inclusive community so everybody's welcome. Hello and welcome to another episode of Rediscovering Childhood. Today we're joined by Shannon McGivern. Hello. Our early years educator, and Laura Crowley. Hello.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good.
So nice to see you today here.
And you?
And to have you here. And I can't wait to... you're so inspiring in everything you do.
Thank you.
Yeah, you really are. And would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so my name is Laura Crowley. I have been in the field of autism for about 24 years now, and I am an autism consultant and additional needs sleep consultant, and I do a lot of work with teens as well on the spectrum and families of children who are autistic. I am the proud mum to one neurodivergent little girl who's 6, affectionately known as Big Boss. And she's autistic and likely ADHD and likely dyspraxic, and she is amazing. And then one neurotypical firebomb who we call Small Boss, who is really the big boss of the house, but she is officially Small Boss. So, and at the age of 40, I myself was identified as autistic after a lifetime of feeling different.
How did that impact your life, knowing that you are autistic?
I was actually talking about this on the way up with my friend, and I was saying that before going for my assessment, I did a lot of journaling about everything that was going on, and I didn't really tell anybody that I was going for the assessment. I only told my husband in June, and I went for the assessment in August, and I had it booked since March. And I remember being really scared that they would tell me I'm not autistic, that I just knew too much, because then I was just a broken neurotypical person. If that was the case, where do you go from there? So when I left the assessment, and I even booked it under my married name, because I knew, like in Cork, I suppose autism is small, and I knew that the psychologist might recognise my name. I work under my maiden name. So I even booked it then. And that way, when I came into the appointment, I even said to her, like, oh, all cards on the table. I've been working in autism for the last 21 years and I booked it under my married name, and my name is actually Laura Crowley. And she went, whoa, stop. She said, there are so many people who have sat in that seat before you with the same story.
There's no judgment here.
There's no judgment here. Let's just start at the beginning. And I remember just breathing. But I came away from it, and afterwards, when she went through everything, she went through the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, 5th edition. And she brought all of the points back to that and explained, yes, you must definitely satisfy the criteria for an autism identification. And I walked out and I got into my car, and I remember just sitting there completely numb. I came home to my husband and I just said, she said, I am. And he knows me at this point, and he said, do you want to talk? And I said, no. I went up to bed and I slept. I was exhausted, and I probably didn't talk to him about it for 3 days. It was 3 months before I properly assimilated all the information, because it's one thing working in services. It's one thing, you know, and I always said that autistic people have taught me way more than I could ever teach them, because I was always learning from my kids. But the thing about being identified so late in life is that you end up reliving your entire life through a different lens. And that made me very sad. I was very sad for the little girl I was. I was very sad for the teenager I was. I was very sad for me in my 20s. And I was even sad for me in my 30s for what I had gone through, probably unnecessarily, because I just thought I was broken. I did not realise that I had a different neurology, because I don't fit the criteria that we look at in the media. I am an accomplished, intelligent woman. I'm married. I have 2 children. I modelled when I was in school. Like, I don't fit the stereotypical 6-year-old white boy who's into trains. And that's what we see in the media. That's the entire kind of picture of autism. But I don't fit any of that. And I suppose what I realised is that I always had the traits. That was always me. But from a very, very young age, I learned that I wasn't enough the way I was, that I had to be more.
So that pressure didn't even come from the environment. It came even mostly for yourself.
Yeah, I think parents always ask, you know, should we tell the child they're autistic? Mm-hmm. You always know. You know you're different. You've internalized your difference. You absolutely know you're different. But unless you're told why, then you're just wrong different. Yeah. You're not right different, if that makes sense. So in that period of mourning for that little girl I was, and the teenager I was, and the 20-year-old and 30-year-old, and looking back at literally life decisions, life circumstances that led me in all different ways, and that caused a lot of anxiety. It caused a lot of depression. I had lots of periods of depression, which then I could see with real crystal clarity at that point after receiving the identification. So I did about 3 months of mourning, but it wasn't mourning the identification in any way, shape or form. It was just mourning the little lost me, all of those years that could have had that clarity. So after that 3 months, I did a post. I did a 12 days of kindness. I used to do that at Christmas. Instead of the 12 days of Christmas, we do 12 days of kindness. And it was activities for kids and stuff that they could do through those 12 days that would spread a little bit of kindness. And on the 12th day is self-kindness. So I wrote a blog post basically detailing everything and just recognising that the ultimate act in self-kindness is being who you are, being unashamedly, if that's the word, who you are, and saying why you are. And that, for me, that was a really, really vulnerable moment, because I'm always more eloquent in written word than I am when I'm trying to say something that I've just processed. Like the stuff I'm talking about here, I've processed over and over and over again. I'm always fine. So at that stage, it was all very raw. It was pretty amazing. Like, people who'd gone to school with me would have messaged, and I had an outpouring of support from people I hadn't seen in years, and they would say, I would never have seen it in you, in school, in college, but it was because I'm like a little kind of swan. I look very graceful up on the outside, and then on the inside I paddle furiously.
And that's the main challenge with autism, that we can't see it.
Yeah.
And
especially in girls.
Yeah, okay, because it's different for boys and girls. Generally speaking, it shows up differently.
Yeah, like you can be female and be classically autistic, as they write it in the books, you know, or you can be male and experience a more internalized version of being autistic. Okay, so there's a kind of a stereotypical female phenotype, which is probably me, you know, that kind of hidden autistic traits. But there is also males who, you know, like there's really famous cases like Pete Wormsby, who's written Untypical. His book is absolutely fantastic, and I resonate so much with it. But he's very much that high functioning, and I'm making bunny ears for anybody who can't see, because it really bothers me when you say high functioning. High functioning is simply highly masked.
Yeah.
It means that someone has the acute awareness to realize that certain behaviors are not socially welcomed, and they have the social motivation to change their behavior according to their settings. So I would be a social chameleon. I fit wherever, even my clothes, my hairstyles, everything. I would have always switched and changed to be what the audience needs, not necessarily what I need.
Yeah, and that builds up inside you.
Mm-hmm.
And that probably comes up as anxiety. Yeah.
Huge anxiety. So if you can imagine that you don't feel enough and that you feel you have to play a role in order to be liked, in order to keep a social circle, but you have to anticipate your role in all settings. That's basically what masking is.
It's exhausting.
It is absolutely, like, I always say it's kind of like wearing a costume that you don't choose, that isn't comfortable. You're not allowed to take it off. It's itchy, it's scratchy, it's tight, and it's damaging to your mental health because you put yourself in it, but you don't know how to take yourself out of it. And unmasking is incredibly difficult.
Yeah. And how can so someone might be listening and thinking, maybe that's me, I resonate with that, and I should get an assessment and get the answers that I need. What would you say to that person? What are the signs? What are the messages there that might help this person?
So I always say you never, ever, ever regret going for an assessment, but you may always wonder if you don't.
Okay.
That's always what I say, you know. I mean, the advice I always give is find a professional who is very knowledgeable in female autism. Because had I gone to somebody who didn't understand the nuances, the differences, and we're still way behind. We're 20 years behind understanding women. I mean, we think it's 1 in 4 people is autistic, or it's, sorry, not 1 in 4. 1 is opposed to 4 boys is to 1 girl or autistic. Reality, it's probably somewhere about the same.
It's the masking.
It's the masking that you know, I'm dealing with it every single day in schools. Little girls who are masking so heavily, they're then ending up with huge mental health issues. And that's when they're given their identification. But they might be 17.
Yeah.
You know, and we could catch these little girls at 4 if we had the right information about what autism looks like for girls who do not have a speech delay or who do not have an intellectual difficulty. We could make huge changes for these little girls' lives. And I see it in my own little girl.
And that's inclusion.
Yeah, like my little girl, and I think I always get a real sense of deep guilt when I talk about this, because when she was born, even when I was pregnant with her, I used to cry to my husband. I was like, she's just like me. And he was like, but she'll be amazing just like you. And I'd be like, no, I can feel it. She is just like me. I'm passing on everything I struggle with, and she is just like me. And my husband was like, no, she's get all the amazing, even if she is a carbon copy of you, she'll be amazing. And I cried and I cried. And I had a traumatic birth with her, and I struggled with postnatal anxiety, and I had to have counselling and that. But within 6 weeks, I can remember sitting in my bed. It was a rainy morning. It was like July, but of course it was rainy in Ireland. She was about 2 months old. My husband was gone to work. She was having a nap beside me, and I was Googling lack of a prosocial smile in babies and later identification as autistic. And there was all these studies, and I was like, she's autistic. I know she is. And I remember kind of cautiously sharing it. She's not, like, she's six weeks old. You just have way too much experience in this. And then I went on a little further, and you know, babies when they're out and about and they would smile at everyone and like be like the Lord Mayor kind of. That was my second baby. She would literally turn it on for people. She'd be like waving and smiling and looking for people's attention. Whereas my first big boss, she used to just be like kind of flat affect. Unless we like did certain things, and then she was all about us. So Kenny came to, she met all her physical milestones, and they came to about 6 months. She wasn't waving bye-bye. And I was like, she should be starting to do that now, because I was acutely aware of all the developmental milestones given my work. So I started teaching her. But one of the classic things she did was she waved backwards, because that's what she sees when I wave at her.
Of course.
She sees the hand going like this. So she waved backwards. And I remember going, that's another
one.
Yeah, that's another one. Then she wasn't pointing. So come 7 months, I started working fairly obviously with her. She wouldn't call me if she needed something. She'd scream. So all these little things. So over the course of the next year, I did a lot of work. We did a lot of work on speech because she was part of a study with CUMH, and her speech at 12 months was on the 5th centile. And I remember getting that result from the psychologist going, okay, we need to do some work. So I kicked in, and she was retested at 18 months, and she was back up to the 78th centile. So she was talking full sentences at that point.
What kind of work were you doing?
Oh my God, everything and anything. We were doing flashcards. I was doing kind of intensive interaction work. I was doing anything that she liked. So she loved songs at the time. So I would sing songs over and over and get her saying the last word, and treating any initiation as if it were a word. So if I said, blah, blah, black sheep, have you any... And she went, I'd be like, yeah, wool, like all this just fun stuff.
Yeah.
We did tea parties, we did whatever it was. And I would just name things and have her. So it was just intensive interaction. I wasn't kind of back to work at that point yet, but it worked. And I have video of her at about 18 months starting her emotional literacy work. It's really cute, actually. It's like, how do I feel? And she goes, I feel sad. Like that. She's got a little book in front of her. So we started all that kind of work really early. And then she was also tongue-tied, which was really, really tough. And she had to go under general anaesthetic in Limerick and get that reversed because hers was actually so bad. She'd never licked an ice cream, hadn't been able to stick out her tongue or anything. And I had brought it up with the paediatrician when she was born. I said, she's tongue-tied. And he laughed and he said, there's no such thing.
That happens all the time.
Yeah. So and it wasn't holding her speech back. That's not what it was. But for me, I just noticed, I was like, she doesn't stick out her tongue. So I brought her to a speech and language therapist, and they said yes, and they referred her on.
It's the experiences they miss out on as well when they're tongue-tied. Just because they don't speak doesn't mean there's other things, like you said, licking an ice cream that she's never been able to do before.
She was never able to do it, and she became over-reliant on her soother as well because,
the sensations had to be inside her mouth, yes.
Exactly. So anyway, that was kind of our start-off journey with her, and like she made huge progress, and I think we were extremely lucky that she was going through a fantastic creche facility. So anything I asked them to do, they just got on board.
Brilliant.
They were like, yeah. But when my second daughter was born, she was 21 months. And I remember going into the creche when she was 22 months, and they saying, look, we think she might need some extra attention. And they were kind of saying everything but autism.
Oh.
They didn't know what I did for a living. I remember looking at them. The manager was there and her key worker. And I said, do you know what I do for a living? They were like, no. I said, I'm an autism consultant. You're talking about autism. And they kind of didn't know where to look. And I said, okay. And in a way, then I was like, everyone, told me I was mad when I was thinking this, but now they're telling me, so it must be true. So we kicked up the intervention a notch again. And she just did so well. And the funny thing is when COVID hit, she came on leaps and bounds, like so much. And I think it was because my other little one was just starting to walk then, and she wanted her interaction more. So she would insist on her interaction. Like she would drag Big Boss around the place to play with her and talk to her. And she was not taking no for an answer, And I have really cute videos of them on either side of the patio door. And Small Boss on one side, going peekaboo, kind of this. And she got a kick out of that because the repetition, she liked that. Yeah. So she was being like, there's no way you're not playing with me. And because it was COVID, they were all the time together. So I think in a way, when she went back to creche, and she would have been in preschool then, they said they saw a huge difference in her socially. And I was like, yay. So then about 3.5, she taught herself to read. And I had done phonics with her because it was one of the things she had taken an interest in, but never blended, never done anything like that, and hadn't done it in 1.5 years at that point. And she just looked at a sign and she went, what's family grass? And I was like, what?
Wow.
And it was on a sign. That was our first thing. And then we said something about SANTA, and she went, what about Santa? And we were like,
No more secrets.
Oh my goodness.
No more secrets. So at 3.5, she was reading. So she's now 6 and she has a current fascination with the periodic table. So that's our current book. And she also wants to learn French. So we're watching videos of French. And yeah, she is amazing. She's fabulous. But we knew that she was going to be autistic. And I think that's what spurred on my journey, because I was like, she is me. Like, and even stuff she did, like she likes to put herself upside down on the couch and watch. And I was like, I used to do that. And she used to like to sleep with her feet on the wall and her head on the pillow. And I remember my husband going, oh God, that's weird. And I went, no, it's that she wants the cold from the wall and the heat from the pillows. And that's a perfect balance.
You understood it completely.
Yeah, because I used to do it. And there was other little stims she did as well that I didn't realise that I did until my husband told me. So I suppose I was very hyper as a child and I was made sit still. So now one of my biggest stims is that I jump all the muscles in my legs and my arms. I'm doing it now, but you can't even see it. So I do it all the time. I'm doing it in my arms now as well. And you'll see me sometimes do it in my hands. I flex my hands back and forth. They're really, really subtle, but they're constant. And it used to drive my husband. When we moved in together, he was like, what are you doing with your legs? And I was like, what? I didn't even notice I was doing it because I'd spent a lifetime doing it. But then she lay across me one day and she was doing it. And I was like, oh, that's what she's doing. I know what she's doing. So I saw so much of myself in her. And I said, you know what? I want her to grow up being so proud. I don't want her growing up feeling broken or less than or anything that I did. I want, and I will, change things for her. So that's when I decided, okay. And I was telling the girl, my good friend Tina Marie, who drove up with me, about how the process started. Was I shared an office with an OT, and the OT is lovely. She's Spanish, she's very straight talking. I loved her for that. I always really liked, because she was just blunt. She was just, we were sharing an office, and she had met my eldest, and then she went, but she didn't get it from nowhere. And I went, pardon? She said, you're severely dyspraxic. Like, no. And she went, oh yes, your desk, your walk, you bash into everything, your gait, everything. You're severely dyspraxic. And I was like, oh. But I had grown up saying I was sportily challenged. Like, I used to make a joke out of anything I struggled with. You know, is that funny or is it just my trauma? But like PE would have been traumatic for me. I always tried to forget my gear or have my period or, you know, anything that I could really
was a struggle
avoid.
For you.
Yeah, because I was so uncoordinated. I could try and kick a ball like straight towards you and it would go behind me. Like there's nights I'd throw teddy bears up the stairs and they should go behind me, and I my coordination is just so poor. She said I was dyspraxic and I went, oh my God, that would actually...
That makes sense.
So much. Because like I used to always joke if my Indian name would be walks into walls. I mean, I was like, because you will see me, I'll be walking towards a door frame thinking I have a foot on either side and now I have a bruise on my arm. You know, like I will literally bash myself off of my spatial awareness is very poor. And my body awareness is very poor. And I'm like 40 odd now, so I'm 43. So I'm not sure how I'm going to fix that. I think I'm just, you know, I live with it now. But these were all Laura-isms. They were never, and I made fun of them because when you make fun of something, it makes light of it. And then others don't take it as seriously. I did not want to be that broken person. Whereas if I kind of made fun of it, like I used to say, I can't eat fruit, like whole fruit. I like smoothies. I love smoothies. I love the taste of fruit, but I don't like the texture, the mouthfeel. Or anything with bits in it. Like I will literally, tears fall down my face. I'm vomiting. And I've been in situations where I've politely eaten something and I'm literally like,
wow.
I can still feel it. But I would say I'm fruit textophobic. So if anybody asked, I was like, no, sorry, I'm fruit textophobic. And it sounds so like official. They don't ask any more than, you don't feel as. But yeah, I always made fun of it. So for me then facing up to all of these little issues meant that if I can be open and if I can be confident and I can be in charge of the rhetoric around my difference, then she has a better hope of seeing her differences as her strength.
Yeah.
Not her brokenness.
Yeah. And helping her is really helping you help your inner child and that broken child. It's a mirror of yourself, and it's nearly a second chance for you to see it from the outside and say, I can do better for you.
Yeah. And we always reparent ourselves through our children. We do.
Yeah.
And that's not saying that my parents did a bad job. It's not. It's just you do the best with the information and the energy you have at any time. And I don't feel that my parents understood me, but that's not on them. I don't think the world would have understood me. I don't think
because of them, you are where you are. Exactly. And then because of you, then she's where she is, and it just gets better.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not an insult to my parents to say that I reparent my child. But you just do the best with the information you have. And I tend to have a lot more information about what my daughter needs than my parents would have about what I needed, because I wouldn't have been recognised 40 years ago. And I did everything possible to just blend everything possible. So for me, my journey is more about my daughter, and the more, doors I can open with my voice, they remain open for her and for the next generation. And a really lovely friend of mine, Jenny, she has a page called Mummy and the Herd. So Jenny's autistic, and two of her lovelies are autistic as well. And her little one in the middle is not autistic, but she's amazing too. But Jenny, when I met Jenny a couple of years ago, I remember her saying to me that autistic women are like unicorns. They're these magical, mythical creatures that people just don't believe exist, but we're there in plain sight.
Yeah.
So she would always say, the unicorn tribe. It's just one more for the
love
unicorn
that.
tribe. Yeah. So I started saying that on my page, and then this lovely woman in Cork, she's contacted me a few times recently now, and she's met other parents of autistic girls, and they formed a unicorn tribe, and they're now up to 12 members.
Wow.
And they have little meetups.
Oh my God, it's
Brilliant.
And I just love it. Like, I love that sense of community.
So important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you need representation. You need community. You need to know that there are other people who share your perspective.
And there is always someone else. You have to find them. Yeah.
It's that tribe, you know. And I think with double empathy theory, like double empathy theory states that like two people who come from alternative neurologies. So for instance, a neurotypical or an autistic person who isn't autistic, as opposed to an autistic person, like the autistic person is experiencing the sensory elements of the environment far different to the holistic person. The smells, the sounds, everything is different. The communication is different. It takes us more energy to interpret the communication of that person. And from the other perspective, they experience the world much differently. They have different styles of communication. So they may find our styles harder to interpret, or interpret as rude, or whatever. And that double empathy problem comes with both of us trying to empathize with the other's perspective and the other's experience. So for me, when we're talking about like young kids, it's really important that they meet other autistic people.
Yeah.
Because if you're always trying to fit with just the alternative neurology, there's always going to be clashes. There's always going to be, because you don't share an experience of the world, and what you experience as hurtful or too much, they don't get that. So you then become too much, because you're seen as kind of, oh, they're always saying it's too loud, or it's too bright, or he's rude. Yeah. So that representation is so important.
Yeah. And how do you present that to a neurotypical child? How do you, say a neurodivergent or an autistic child bites them, or they have different rules or things like that, and they think it's unfair that they get away with things that they don't? How do you present that?
So I do a lot of talks for schools about autism and kind of recognizing neurodivergence and that. So one of the things I do is I talk about there's 8 billion people on the planet. That means there's 8 billion brains. And those 8 billion brains, if they were all the same, we would still be living in a cave. We would. Nobody would have thought of fire yet. Nobody would have thought outside the box. And we need different brains to look at problems differently. So difference is actually what makes the world go round. And when you're talking about kids, you know, who have more visible behavioural differences, what I usually bring out is a little iceberg. And I say, you know what, when we're looking at the behaviour, and I know it's hard, it's really hard because that's a really physical behaviour. But I want to show you that that behaviour is the tip of the iceberg for that little person. And that little person has all this stuff going on underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And while it looks like I'm being lenient with a bite, it's not that I'm being lenient. I'm trying to help them figure out what's going on their iceberg so that that bite doesn't happen again. Because by me chastising them or punishing them for biting, it's not going to stop it happening. Yeah, it's not going to stop it happening. It's just going to transfer the problem to a different behaviour.
Yeah.
So with kids, it's normally a visual tack I take. And I always think the iceberg is a great one because it's really properly visual. And we could even get ice cubes and put them in the water and you'll see the top float and the bottom go underneath. And I'd say that's just like your iceberg. But there's a lot more in this iceberg for this little person right now.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to support them with. And not to take away their pain of being bitten or not to take away their emotional kind of needs around that. To really focus on helping them with that, but also recognizing that actions are not just skin deep. There's always something. And, you know, if somebody's hurting you, then it's likely they're hurting.
Yeah. How can we help neurodivergent children, autistic children to express their emotions in a way that's easier for them? How can we make it more comfortable?
So emotions are really complex, and it's actually one of my favorite areas to work in because I can remember being 26 and Googling what is worry. And I only learned what anxiety was when I was 28. There's a really interesting phenomenon or it's actually a personality trait, they say. So it's not exclusive to autism, but it's alexithymia, and that's the inability to be able to understand the emotions of yourself or others, okay? And emotions are really complex. They're really super complex. But at the root of emotions are internal sensations in your body. And what we find with a lot of autistic people is that your interoception, which is your internal state of your body, okay, and understanding when you're hungry, when you're thirsty, when you're angry, when you're tired, when you're hot, when you're cold, a lot of those body signals aren't as strong in autistic people. For me, I have different areas of strength in them. Sickness, I can feel coming. Probably 2-3 days in advance, I'm like, I'm going to get sick. I know it. I can just feel the offness in my body. My body just feels unbalanced and wrong, and I can't get enough sleep. And then 2 days later, I'm like, I'm sick.
Oh.
But I can go all day without drinking and not notice my thirst. So I have to keep this giant, like, it looks like you could assault someone with it, this giant bottle of like water. And I'd say clients see me on Zoom drinking out of this bottle. It takes over my head. But I can't, if I don't have that, I don't drink.
And then at the end of the day, are you like overcome with thirst? Or it's, so it's just when it's too late, you notice it then?
When I'm too late. And then I'm trying to down water before bed. And then I'm up all night. But that's the way my interoception works. I've taught myself how to tune into my physical manifestations, like the pain and all that. I just haven't really cued on hunger and thirst yet, so I can go hours without eating and kind of forget, especially if I'm hyper focusing. I just don't feel those signals build up. And it's the same with emotion. So if you're not tuned into your emotional signals and you don't understand what they feel, so all the big emotions just feel too big, even if it's happiness, they just feel. Then you're going to overreact because you don't feel them until they're so big that you explode. And I have a gorgeous teenage client, and she asked me a question there last week, and she said, when I feel sad, I want to stay sad. It feels kind of good, and I don't know why. And we talked about it, and we explained about interoception, and I said, it's likely that your sadness when you get to that point is so big that that's a level of emotion that you're not used to. So it feels good to feel something. Now we just have to get the more comfortable emotions to get to that level as well, so that you're not relying on sadness to feel something. She went, that makes so much sense. So with emotions, getting to be able to display them appropriately starts with being able to feel them. And some of the exercises I do with kids would be around, what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? Because for autistic people, we don't have a lot of the same expressions. Like, we can be smiling and be having a panic attack. Okay? So to somebody outside, she's happy, you know, whereas internally I am, and I have done that. I've been at Santa experiences with my husband and trying to hold it together while having such a bad panic attack that I really thought I was having a heart attack. And we just got out of Santa and I said to my husband, I am dying. You need to get me home. And he was like, what? He didn't.
Yeah.
And I
Where
said,
does it come from? Yeah.
So we need to look, what does it look like? But for you, because happiness for them may look different to happiness for somebody else. What does it look like? What's it look like in you? And I get the whole family to do it. This is what it looks like for mum. This is so then now they're starting to, you know, emotionally reference. Well, that's mum's happy face. Mum might be happy. I wonder, is mum happy? And you can ask the question, what does it sound like? So what does your voice sound like when you're anxious? What does your voice sound like when you're sad? What does it sound like when you're angry? What are all these different things? When you build up a profile, an emotional kind of bank of reference points, that one they struggle with most is, what does it feel like? And this is when we go into the body and we say, you know, okay, so I was doing one with somebody last week and we were talking about excited. And she was like, I don't know what it feels like. So I said, close your eyes. I want you to think of a time that you were super excited. And we did it, and she had her eyes closed and you could see her face changing and everything. And she was talking about a holiday. And I said, now think about, I want you to do a body scan. We're going to start at your toes. Does that feel different? She's like, no. So we went all the way up, and when she got to here, she said, excitement is just between my chest and my neck. And I was like, there's your excitement. So we wrote that down and we coloured in the neck and the head part on her little body drawing. That's her reference. So now she feels something in her neck and her chest, she's like, maybe I'm excited about this.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have to point out as well that the tummy area is like a hotbed for different things. You can be hungry. You can have a tummy ache. You can also be anxious or worried, because when we're anxious, our digestive system slows, and that makes that butterfly feeling in your tummy, because it's not a necessary organ at that stage. So then when we're trying to talk about acting on emotions, if you don't know what you're feeling, then all the zones of regulations are going to be absolutely no good to you. And I think the language we use as well around understanding emotions. So we often talk about good and bad emotions, or positive emotions and negative emotions. And you'll find with the autistic community, we love right and wrong. We love rules, yeah? But we don't want to be wrong. So if you tell us that this is a positive and this is a negative emotion, we're not going to want to admit to being in the negative emotions at all. And we might be freaking out, but we'll still tell you, no, I'm happy.
Yeah.
I'm not cross. And they're like, you know, and you can see it building in them. So even the language we use around it, we need to use comfortable and uncomfortable, because that's what they are. The positive emotions generally that we talk about are comfortable. And those negative emotions that we think about when we think about sad and angry and scared and, you know, all those when disappointed, they're very uncomfortable. So now we have a reference of what does it feel like and look like and sound like for us. But we've also changed the rhetoric to being something more doable for the autistic child, in that they're not wrong if they have any of these emotions, but it's okay to feel anything at all. It's how you cope with it that counts. So we name it to tame it. We say what we're feeling. We use, whether that's by word, by text, by post-it, you know, and usually for autistic people, speaking verbally at the point of a high emotion is very unlikely. My husband has received more texts from me about really serious things because I tend to experience what I like to call stress-induced mutism. So if something is very important to me or very uncomfortable for me, my brain can be screaming it, but my mouth won't say it. So I'm likely to say, I might say to my husband, I'm super anxious, by text. So if we can provide non-verbal ways of communicating those.
Whatever works.
Yeah. And showing them that, like, it doesn't have to be a 5-point scale or anything like that, because sometimes that's hard for kids, like 5 points. So I either express it as an upside down triangle. So we have a little bit of this feeling, a medium bit of this feeling, or a big bit of this feeling. And the important thing is we act when it's small or medium, because when it's too big, then we're past the point of being able to, handle productively.
It, yeah.
Or we can do traffic lights. So when I'm green, super calm. When I'm amber, that's kind of a sign that we should slow down and we should stop what we're doing and we should deal with what's going on. And in red, then we're just stopping to support. But giving children a visual way to understand it, a visual way to communicate it, that's where I see dividends with emotional kind of coping mechanisms. But it's not as simple as doing flashcards or anything like that. And I think flashcards can be more difficult for kids because they're wondering, should I look like this? I don't look like this when I'm scared.
It's very generalised.
Yeah.
Even down to whether it's a boy or a girl feeling that as well. And it's usually animated too.
Yeah. And like a lot of kids, when they're angry, they don't look like anger. So it's really about personalising everything and making sure that you have the emotional granulation, which is like the vocabulary to be able to discuss issues. I remember a few years ago, this gorgeous client who had lost her grandmother and she was really struggling to articulate. And she said, everyone keeps telling me I'm sad. I'm not sad. My feeling is way bigger than sad. So I took out a thesaurus and we started looking through like alternatives. Let's look for words. Let's see if there's one that satisfies what you feel. And devastated. Okay. When she read devastated, she was like, that's it. I am devastated. And we went to the dictionary, we looked up devastated and the definition of it. And she's like, that's what I am.
Power of language.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge.
But she got solace from being able to name that. Not only looking at like how we can portray emotions, but also giving children the emotional language to be able to accurately identify where they are even on that spectrum of emotion. And I love getting paint cards, the ones you get in like Woodies and B&Q with all the you can bring kids in and be like, okay, what colour is anxiety? And they might be like yellow. Okay, let's get a yellow colour card. Now we're going to come up with 5 different words for the different levels. And it might start with like kind of a little bit bothered and then worried. And then it might be scared in the middle there, all the way up to like nervous wreck even, like whatever they can. So that way now they have like a graduated visual and the language to say what they need. So we're coming at it from all the way from a really rudimentary perspective of understanding what an emotion is, all the way up to the more complicated expressions of the full spectrum of the emotional feeling. But that's something that's a very long process. It's really, really long. And it's not something that's done overnight with kids. And I think that's one of the things I see with the zonal regulation, that in my opinion, it's a great program, but it's missing certain elements because kids don't want to be in the blue.
Yeah.
Because that's negative, they want to stay in the...
It's again, the positive and negative.
Yeah. So it's about presenting emotions as this just wide spectrum, and that we don't need to be in a good range or a bad range. We're just in the human range. And there's some, amazing books out there that can really support that idea as well. Like Be Mindful of Monsters. Mm-hmm. I love that book. And my girls love that book. It's all about a little boy, Izzy, who sees his emotions as monsters. And the more he ignores them, the bigger they get. And his mum says, well, if you just let them in and see what they're trying to teach you.
Accept it, yeah.
So, I think one of the most powerful things I ever learned to do is when I feel something, especially anxious. And I was anxious coming here today, and that's natural. And I'm fine with that. And before I would have fought it. But now I'm like, oh, I'm anxious. It's okay. And that's why I stayed in the car until 10, because I'm more comfortable in my car than I would be in a new place, even though I've looked at the Google Maps images and everything of this place, so I knew where I was going. But in my car, I'm safe and I wasn't as anxious as I would have been had I walked in.
Yeah.
Just even when I feel the feeling now, I locate it and I say, you belong. The minute you say you belong, you're not trying to force it out. You're not trying to get rid of it. You'll notice your body just kind of
calm,
falling into it. and then I breathe. And breath work can't be underrated. The power of breath work is amazing. That's my kind of way of dealing with my emotions now. But I'm very acutely aware that my emotional state impacts my kids' emotional state, impacts the house's emotional state, and all the relationships within that. So I am very, very kind of intent on creating a path of emotional wellness for my kids, because I don't want them experiencing the ups and downs as heavily as I did.
Yeah, and for everything you say, I think the biggest outtake I'm taking here is how important it is to have as many experiences as possible to really get to know yourself, you know, with the fruit, and to really, because once you know exactly what you need, what way you communicate, what way you embody your emotions, you feel them, and you can prevent that and accept it. So for children, it's just so important to give them that time and space where they can explore who they are, what they like, what they don't like, what they're good at, what they're not so good at. It's more challenging. It's just so, so, so important. And it really it always comes down to play and having fun and preventing before it happens, before that big emotion explodes. It's through play, through role play and puppets and, you know, books, anything. It's really anticipating those emotions, those feelings.
Yeah, and you can do the precursory work on emotions through play. I mean, that's how I came across your shop first, because I was hell-bent on doing so much sensory play with my kids when they were small, especially when I was anticipating Big Boss's needs. But one of the most beneficial trays I ever did was with emotions, faces, and little and Play-Doh, and I had loads of little bits and pieces in a big tough tray, and just the conversation that can flow when children are, 1, regulated, 2, that they're doing something that kind of lights that internal fire, which is play, play 100%. And 3, you can get a lot more out of kids when you're not face to face, like instructing them. You're just chatting and you're like, oh, I see you made a happy face. Wow, like that. That must have taken some work. How did you make that? And they talk about the smile. Oh, does the smile go up when someone's happy? I wonder, is that always the case? Does anyone not smile when they're happy? Just talking out these things, and they're chatting back and forth to me. That's when I've gotten the most out of my kids. And through books, reading, anytime I come up with like a block with the kids, anything at all, I go on and I look for a book. And I'm like, that storytime book. This is a way of them internalizing a message. And if we read it enough times, the conversations will flow from it. And again, with, you know, I've walked in on my kids playing with little fairies, actually, that we got from you guys, tubes. And they're making this world where the fairies were going to fairy school for the first time. And it was around the time that, you know, Small Boss was going to school for the first time. But they were acting the whole thing out. And I'm just listening from the door going, this is their process. They don't need me in it. But I want to listen and hear what's coming out. And that's the magic, I think, that comes with that space. And we moved house recently, and it was really important for us to have a full playroom for the kids. So we turned one of the bedrooms into a full playroom. So we have climbing wall and Swedish ladder and full art station and, you know, all of these things. And we did this specifically because Big Boss needs so much movement. So
it's a space for self-expression as well.
Yeah, and it's their space, you know, it is their space. So we've crash mats and everything and gymnastics mats and the whole lot for her. Wow. But she needs that movement. And we must get in a swing now as well for the roof. That's the space. If I sit outside that door, I hear so much of what's going through their little minds in their play. You
wouldn't know that if you asked them.
No, they're not going to come out with that kind of stuff. So that's the value. For me, that's the value of having all of that. And I'm very big on creating a space that just has props. So I have loads like just wooden pieces or just people without faces or, you know, all those things that can be whatever they need it to be at that time in that space.
Yeah.
And that for me is where I get the gold.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely. Yeah. And what are the different types of communication for an autistic person? How does that differ from a neurotypical person?
Well, we're usually very direct.
I think everyone needs to learn from.
Yeah, we're super direct. And it's never meant in an unkind way. It's just, I mean, I always say, just if you never ever ask an autistic person a question you don't want the answer to. You know what I mean? Like,
No.
I can remember being in a session with an 8-year-old little girl, and oh my God, she's fabulous. But I just got my nails done and they were bright pink, and they were a bit like, now this is like 8 years ago, I'd say. So I was about 35, 36 maybe. And I remember she was sitting there and she was like, yeah, they're really nice, but a bit young for you.
Oh,
And I was like, you know what? You're actually right. They are a bit young for me. They were Barbie pink. Like they
so
were.
it's not just about I like them or I don't like them.
It's the full package. And I would have always gotten in trouble for that. You know, I mean, even when we moved into our new house there and I met new neighbours, I knew the neighbour to my right and I actually didn't know the neighbour to my left. And she's such a lovely person. She's so doty. But I just had to say to her at the start, don't ask me a question that you don't want an honest answer. Yeah. And if I ever offend you, you just need to say it. Because for me, if somebody doesn't say it, it festers. And that's how relationships end for us. But it would never have been my intention to insult or offend. I'm not that type of person. I'm a complete empath. I feel others' pain physically. And that's a whole other part of being, I think, undiagnosed and unidentified autistic, because you learn to read the room and you're constantly looking for threats, and that's how you become an empath. I don't think I was born an empath, but my constant rejection and stuff led to me reading the room the minute I walk in and looking for kind people. That was one of the things I always do. I look for someone who smiles and I gravitate towards them. So with that kind of internal like feeling, you don't want to offend anyone. And I can feel the moment that something happens because I feel the energy shift, but I can't tell what's happened. And I am good with like reflective theory of mind, in that I can go, oh my God, I said that. And they then interpret it as that.
And I should have said.
Yeah, but that wasn't my intention. But what happens is some people get like offended and don't want to say it and walk away and are too cross. And it's how friction starts. So I always say, you know, if you even think they're neurodivergent in any way, say it. You know, you say, can you just repeat what you said? And if they repeat it, they may understand why. And if they don't, you just say, look, I'm actually really offended by that. You know, but it wouldn't be ever my intention. Yes, I can be brutally honest. I really try, like a new tack I've tried is that if somebody asks me something and I generally don't like it, I'll go, the colour is great. So I'll pick something.
To like side around having to tell your opinion on it. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's my way now of trying not to be as, but I am like, if somebody asks me a question and they're likely to get a very straight answer. So I like facts. Oh, and one other thing that really has to be said about autistic people is when somebody tells us something, like for instance, you might say, oh, you know, my friend recently passed away. Now, my initial thing is I flood with that feeling. And then the autistic kind of way to come back is to identify a situation in which I felt something similar and tell the story. And that can be really interpreted as you taking over and you dismissing that person's grief or that person's pain. But that's not the intention behind it. The intention behind it is actually to find common ground and to let the person know that you understand where they're at.
Yeah, I felt that way too. I had that experience as well.
But it's not my intention to take it. I'm trying to give it.
It's like you're trying to meet them in the middle to know that you're there with them.
Yeah. And a lot of autistic people do that because that's concrete. That's me saying, oh, I get it. But in neurotypical terms, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go, oh my God, and you're just supposed to just sit there and listen.
But nobody does that anyway.
I think
generally they put their foot in it and tell some stupid story about this one time.
Neurotypical even a thing? Like nobody does that.
Yeah. Well, that would be the stereotypical kind of response, is that you sit and you listen and you empathize.
Yeah.
But I find when I do that, the further I get into empathy, the more pain I'm in. So if I can relate to something that I experience, it takes me out of that and into a rhetoric. I don't know if I'm explaining it concretely, but I think that's another facet of autistic communication that is kind of misunderstood. And yeah, we can be very direct, but we are so loyal. And when we forge a connection, we'll do whatever it takes for that person until they show us otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you're saying a lot of time for you giving, it's like brutally honest, and from like an autistic perspective, that's just how it works. Like that's, if you ask a question, I'm going to tell you how it is. In speaking to someone who is autistic, do you kind of expect that same thing from another person as well?
Yeah. And I think the hardest thing in friendships that I've found with neurotypical people, and I can look back now and literally trace it, and that was part of when I was digesting my identification. I do what I say and I say what I do. I expect that of other people too. So if somebody's saying they'll do something and then they don't do it, I really struggle with understanding that. And I've had situations in the past where people have said, well, you must have known we wouldn't do that. And I'm like, no, because you said it up until even yesterday. You were doing that. And they were like, but you must have known the circumstances around it. And I'm like, even with the circumstances around it, I would never tell somebody that I'm going to do something if I'm not going to do it. That really impacts relationships, because what neurotypical people do is they read between the lines and they look at the whole picture. I'll take someone on their word. If they say they're going to do something, I expect it to be, because that's how I operate. If I say I'm going to write this program and it's going to be written by the end of July and I'm going to submit it for you at the end of July, it will happen. Even if I have to pull all-nighters, it will be done. So I treat others then
the same way. And they oftentimes can't understand why I'm cross. And that's that double empathy thing again. But I do think that's definitely the reading between the lines that is expected. I don't do until afterwards. And I'm really good at the retrospective. I have total 20/20 vision then. I'm like, oh, so that's what they were saying when they said that. Yeah. I missed that part of the conversation. I focused on this part and I kind of didn't absorb that because I wasn't listening to the kind of hypothetical stuff.
That must be really tiring that you always feel like you have to go back on conversations to make sure that you're coming out the way you want to as well, and people are understanding what you want from it.
Oh yeah, like I still have conversations that play in my head from when I was 12, when I was 16, when I was 18, when I was 24, that I wake with. And letting those go is definitely a process I still haven't mastered. But the self-kindness and the self-compassion, that's been, so I always say my identification has been transformative. I celebrate my autistic birthday every year. It's the 11th of August. I celebrate it every year. I was 3 this year. And yeah, I celebrate it because that was when I felt seen for the first time in my life, and I felt of value and I felt worthy of everything that I have, everything that I've worked for.
And the freedom.
The freedom. To finally unmask. But unmasking is so hard. It's so incredibly hard, but I'm getting better at it all the time. I no longer sit in spaces that I don't feel welcome or valued.
To learn to say no as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because with masking, no is not a word you use because it lets people down.
Put yourself first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's also about even physical masking. Like my hair, my clothes, I would have chosen clothes for different groups that I was meeting. I would try and go with what they would expect me to wear. I don't do that anymore. I just do what I want to do.
Just to blend in.
Yeah. Just not to stand out, just to be one. But it's transformative for me. It's been the best thing I've ever done. I am happier. My mental health has never been so good. Never been.
Amazing.
So good. So,
what's the main difference between autistic, highly sensitive, ADHD? these terms can be a bit...
So ADHD is a kind of controversial one at the moment, because we're now learning about ADHD in women as well. And I am fully convinced I'm also ADHD, because like even driving up here, I was talking to my friend, the radio was on, but I was having two conversations and there was a different song playing in my head. And that's always the way it is. And there's full-blown conversations going on in my head at all times, but it could be two. But it's always me. I'm just talking about different things. And then there could be a song that I don't even like stuck in my head. So ADHD is more of a brain difference again. And it's, it's like having this very famous phrase, like a Ferrari brain. Everything is fast. Everything is, we're either in Firefly, which is like flitting from one thing to the other, or Train, which is hyperfocus. And there is a lot of similarities and crossovers. And I think in the latest statistics, they were saying up to 80% of the people on the spectrum will have a comorbid identification of ADHD or ADD. So there is similarities in that. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, are you ADHD or is it part of your autism? And in terms of, what was the other one you asked me?
Highly sensitive.
Highly sensitive. So with highly sensitive, I'm not hugely knowledgeable in that area, but I do know that with autism, one of the core diagnostic features of autism is a sensory difference and a sensory system difference. And I don't think that's experienced by the highly sensitive population. I think the actual differences in perceiving the sensory system and the difference in social communication is also different. So, but the highly sensitive psychologist on Instagram is brilliant. She's amazing. She shares loads and loads about highly sensitive children. So it wouldn't be my area of focus, but she's one to look at if you're looking for that.
And then sensory processing disorder would be also a way of simply...
Yeah. And oftentimes kids who are identified as having sensory processing difficulties go on to have further identifications, because it's a core feature of so many neurodivergent conditions. And I hate the word disorder, but in ways
I realised when I said it.
No, not at all.
But that's what they're called though as well, unfortunately, yes.
Exactly, and you're not going to be able to change the DSM, But I do always say that I am disordered in the way I experience the world. So I understand that disordered, but I also realise that I'm only disordered to somebody who isn't experiencing the world the way I experience. And I am very much, I always say I'm disabled, but I'm not disabled by my neurology. Just as if the world was made for people who were 4 foot tall, I'd be disabled by that because I'm 5'8". That would be disabling for me. So I'm disabled by the world, the way I experience it, and the way other people experience it and expect me to feel the same way, which I don't. So I do feel like I have a disability. I don't think it's a bad word. I think, unfortunately, the stigma around the word disability is harsh and it is extremely ingrained. But I think by being open and saying, yes, I have most definitely a disability. I walk into doors. I hurt myself constantly. I'm always covered in bruises.
But that's nearly a challenge for the community to say, how can we stop it from being a disability?
Yes.
It shouldn't be. And that, again, it's inclusion.
Yeah, and it's universal design. So when we're looking at buildings, like even here now, those strip lights, I think they should be banned in every building in the world.
Claim it.
Yeah, and they're in every office building you go into. But I can guarantee you, for the hour I leave here, they will be imprinted on my eyeballs.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's fine because I'm kind of used to that now at this point. But that is disabling because it's very hard to concentrate. Then, if you can imagine, there's like a line across my eyeballs now, and I'm not even looking directly at it. But I do think that breaking this stigma around disability and difference is really, really important, because we have so many children coming up through the world. And we want them having an active part in society, striving to use their difference for their benefit. And, that's all I want for my daughter. But in order to do that, there has to be stigmas broken. There has to be something, and I'm openly autistic. There are definitely people at the school gates who know I'm autistic and avoid me talking to me because they don't understand. I know that, but I remember I did an article a few months ago for Autism Awareness Day, and one parent who I knew came up to me at the school gate, and it was obvious she was really uncomfortable, and she went, I read your article. I would have never guessed you're autistic, but I'm blown away. Like, well done for being so honest. It's absolutely amazing. And I said afterwards, I was like, she was really uncomfortable, but she put herself in that position to make me comfortable. Mm-hmm. And that's what being open, being honest, being me publicly can do for my daughter.
Yeah.
So that they pass on that there's nothing wrong with being autistic. It's just
the opposite.
Different. Yeah, it's just being different.
Yeah.
And I know that now being autistic has given me so many gifts. And one of them being that my special interest has been autism since I was 20. And that for me has made me a better practitioner and a better professional. And that has been my gift.
Has your understanding of autism, obviously by studying it for so long, helped the transition into getting your identification of autism as well?
I don't think it has. No? Do you want to know why though? Because I think everything we've known about autism has come from that little 6 and 7 year old white boy who's into trains.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so all our textbooks, everything is all biased towards boys. So because then I was so different, then you find, well, where do I fit? And it was actually Jennifer Cook. She's an author. She's written, oh my God, she's New York Times bestseller. She's amazing. She's visited Ireland a few times. She's keynoted in Cork. And the last time she was here, my daughter was a few months old and she came to visit me in my house and have dinner because my husband was going to a funeral, so I couldn't go out to meet her. And she's so lovely. She's just amazing. She's autistic. Her ex-husband was autistic. Their 3 kids are autistic. Her new husband's autistic. So she's just amazing. And she wrote this book, Autism in Heels. I always knew she was autistic, that way. But I always got on, clicked. We clicked from day one. And that's what you find with neurodivergent people. We just get each other, and other people may struggle to get them and get on, but I never did. And it's funny now looking back, I can see, that person was neurodivergent as well. But she came to my house and she said, have you read my latest book? And it's called Autism in Heels. It was her kind of looking back at her life post-identification. And she was identified at 34 after her daughter was identified. And I said, no, I haven't. I was in the midst of postnatal depression, and I said, but it's on my list. And then COVID hit, so I had loads of time. So I read it, and it was like every chapter I was like, oh my God,
identifying
that's me.
Yeah,
that's she's just like, this is me. And in the book there's a chick list, not a checklist, but a chick list, and it's all like traits. So that was after the conversation with the OT, who was like, you're severely dyspraxic. Then I was like, okay, let's see, let's follow this up. So yeah, I think reading her book made me understand that I wasn't alone, that I wasn't even a broken autistic person. And then I think my fascination came with women and girls, and I just started ploughing all my energy into understanding the experience of women and girls, understanding masking, understanding empaths, how I can be an extroverted introvert. Like for some people, I get very charged by their company. And then for others, I am drained for days. So I have kind of started being more careful about my energy and who I spend my time with. Mm-hmm. And that's a self-preservation thing, but it's also an unmasking thing. And I have removed myself from spaces.
Not an easy thing to do.
No, and it's very, very difficult to do. But there comes a time in your life and you say, when I'm 70, do I want to look back and say I wasted time?
Yeah.
And I wasted my energy? And I had to lie down for 2 days after going somewhere because I didn't want to be there. And I didn't feel comfortable or accepted. Or I think her book was my eye-opener.
Well, definitely on my list, 100%. And Laura, as I said at the beginning, you're amazing. You're an inspiration, even more now. Thank you so, so much. And I hope so many listen for you here or anywhere, because the world has to change and you can definitely make it better.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was so lovely to meet you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. Guest, what's your name?
My name is Jake and I'm 6 years old. I'm turning 7 in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks? Hi Jake, that's so exciting. Are you going to have a party?
Yeah.
Yeah?
And it's going to be in my mom's house and I'm going to have an obstacle bouncy castle.
Your mum is so kind, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where's your mum?
My mom she's here.
She's here? Is it me?
Yeah.
Can I be your mum?
Yeah.
Yay, thank you.
Because she is my mom.
I am your mummy. Did you go to school, Jake?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you like going to school?
But I didn't spend the whole day in school because I had to go.
You left a bit early to come here to the podcast.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. Do you want to tell us something about school? What's the best thing about school? Your favorite thing?
And my favorite thing is I have 3.
Three things.
First is time because you can play with your friends. And second is math because you can learn about numbers and you can do sums. And second of all is...
And third?
And third of all is... lunchtime because you can eat. And you can eat some... And on Friday or Tuesday, I think, you can bring one sweet to school, but you can only eat it on big break.
Oh, that's nice. And you play with your friends in school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes, lunchtime is for 1 minute.
1 minute only?
Yeah.
You must eat so fast.
No, that literally is so short.
Is it? What do you do in school? What do you like the most?
It is the first,
Is it PE?
yeah.
Is it?
Because you can do like loads of games. You can do dodgeball and tag, flush the toilet, and there's this game that you can so you have the blue balls are for unfreezing people and the yellow balls are for unfreezing people when they're frozen. In my class there's these yellow, so there is green,
Yeah.
orange and red. So if you go to red, you lose a point. If you go to green, that means you're very good and you get another point. And if you go to orange, means you're kind of, I don't know, you nearly lose a point, but it's like something when you go to orange,
What makes you go to orange? What you have to do to go to orange and lose the point? Or red?
you have to be bad.
Bad?
No, not bad. It's like you have to... So imagine I went to school. And then, I pushed someone. And then he would give me a warning. If I get up to, another warning, I would have to go to orange.
Oh, I see. Because you do things that you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
They're bad or annoying for other children or for the teacher, is it?
Yeah. And the next thing, what are you going to say next?
Next. Oh, do you want me to ask you a question? Yeah. What do you like to do when you finish school? When you're not in school? When you're at home or somewhere? What's your favorite thing to do?
Eat snacks.
Eat snacks. There are no snacks left. And what else do you like to eat? Well, you eat your snacks.
Play. And I like to play and jump. Those things where you skate and then your scooter jumps very high. It's called a ramp. So you pedal on your scooter and then you jump. And then you go and jump.
And doing going on your scooter.
Yeah.
And playing with your friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's your favorite toy?
My favorite toy. My favorite toy is... it's so hard. I have loads of favorite toys. It's probably... I don't know what my favorite toy is.
Do you like maths?
Yeah.
You love numbers?
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite number?
My favorite number is 18.
18?
No, actually 14.
14.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to say to any teachers or other children that are parents that are listening?
No, bye.
Okay.
Bye.
He just wants to go eat the marshmallows. Yeah. Is that right? He's gone. Bye. I'll see you next time. Thanks, Jake. He's gone. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you'd like to share your own story on our podcast, please get in touch through our social media. Don't forget to like, share and follow so you'll never miss out on upcoming episodes. See you next time!